Thank you, everybody, for being here this evening. So essentially what we're going to do is David and I are just going to share some thoughts and theory, really, about acting in games based on our experience and the experience of our peers as well. And then at the end, we'll have a chance to have a bit of a Q&A, maybe address some of the particular issues that you might have experienced for those of you who have worked with actors already. And if you have any sort of further thoughts on that or anything you'd like to share. I know we have a lot of people in the room tonight who also, have a lot of experience on both sides of the table, as it were. So we're always happy to hear your feedback and thoughts too at the end of this presentation. So, David, is there anything you wanted to add before I kind of kick off?
It's my first time doing PowerPoint and a Zoom call at the same time. So if it all goes to hell, just bear with me, please. And also, if there's anything you don't understand while we are chatting, just raise your hand virtually, and we'll stop, and you can let us know what it is you're wondering.
I hope we can see that, because I can literally only see a few faces down the side of my screen. So I suppose we could. Okay, great. That's what happens. Thank you, Alejandro. Wonderful. Great. Okay, good. I don't want anybody to feel like they're being ignored, because we don't want to be rude. Okay. All right, here we go. So everybody, I would like you to just take a moment to think about an actor in a film or a TV or even on stage whose work has really captivated you. And perhaps there's something about their performance that affected you on a kind of emotional or intellectual or visceral level. So just take a moment to think of who that person might be and kind of see them in your mind's eye, and maybe have a little recap in your imagination as to what you saw them in and how it made you feel. And I'll just give you a wee second to think about that. So when we think about that performer, it's really useful for our purposes tonight to understand how it is that they do what they do. In other words, what is the process that engenders this excellence in their work? And chances are that this actor's process is something that is born out of training and is continually nurtured as they apply the techniques of that training in their work. And historically, there's a huge vein of actor training methods from really around the world, which is important to recognize, Greece, Africa, Asia. And for many actors in the Western world, there is a very common thread that underpins our approach to training and work. And that person is a gentleman by the name of Konstantin Stanislavski.
Stanislavski, he was a Russian theater practitioner alive at the turn of the last century. And he may well be considered the great granddaddy of actor training. He dedicated his life to understanding the composition of great performance, and he tirelessly developed methods that will no doubt be very familiar to some of the actors that you are thinking about right now. Stanislavski's influence, it's wide-reaching, and we've relied on his approaches for over 100 years. Now, we don't have a lot of time, so we're not going to go into great details about Stanislavski's work, but we bring it up because Stanislavski's methods are so embedded in an actor's psyche. His methods provide a structure by which an actor can build let me change the slide here. Yep. A naturalistic, believable, and captivating performance.
So the question is, what are the building blocks of this structure? Stanislavski's contribution is vast, of course, but we can cover some of the basics. So Stanislavski suggests that to create a performance that is specific and authentic, the actor must have a clear understanding of the following: objectives, what do I want? Obstacles, what is in my way? Tactics, how do I get what I want? And the stakes, why does it matter? He also argues that an actor must invest in the physical aspects of character. So this would include how the character walks and moves through the world, how their body language contributes to the telling of their story, and perhaps gives away their hidden thoughts and feelings. and how the physical aspect of ourselves contains the truth of our traumas, our joys, our culture, and even our family history. So let's put it this way. Our bodies and our gestures are powerful tools that can completely shift our state of being. And you can try this when you're on the tube on the way home tomorrow from work. You can just put your head in your hands and sit there for a while, and you'll start to realize that this is the posture of despair. And when you hold this posture, as you can see these people doing in this slide, how does it affect you? How does it affect the people around you? If you're present to these changes within yourself, you might recognize a shift into sadness. This in turn will alter the way that you communicate. Your voice will sound different, and others will pick up on this subtle but profound shift.
So after you've delivered yourselves to the depths of despair, it might be a good idea to course correct with the posture of joy, which may look a little bit like this. We're not going to make you do this during the Zoom, promise. But here's the thing. The process itself takes time spent in contemplation and in collaboration with a director, a writer, and your fellow performers. So you may know that Daniel Day-Lewis famously spends over a year preparing for his roles.
So, of course, not all actors have the luxury of a year on prep, but many of us will be accustomed to at least a reasonable amount of time to prepare for our work. And when we can take the time to analyze the who, the what, when, and where of our character and the scenes that tell the story, then the how we do all of that takes care of itself. And this is quite important. The how an actor plays things is really a byproduct of creative thought and collaboration in rehearsal and in performance. So if an actor puts the cart before the horse, in other words, makes choices about how to deliver a performance before they've had the chance to really explore and live in the character's shoes, then we can end up with a performance that is hollow, generalized, and non-specific. And this is what we sometimes call results-based acting. So this means that an actor will simply play a state of being, such as anger or sadness or joy, or they might take on a generalized attitude of being tough and scared. And the danger in this approach is that nuance and authenticity go right out the window. And there can be results-based directors too. And I was in a recording session a few years ago. My performance director's only note over and over and over again was, make her angrier. Jane, no, she has to be angrier. Okay, well, just make her angrier. And, you know, I really cringe when I hear those audio files now, because my performance was wooden and hollow and it was lacking in depth. And I'm sad to say that. So am I a bad actor? I really hope not. I'm classically trained with 25 years of experience on stage, TV, and film. But regardless, this director's approach to my work made no room for the actor's process that I had carefully developed over decades in my career, and the end result was simply not good.
So the question we can ask ourselves now is, how detrimental is bad voice acting to a game? So let's look at some reviews of a game that came out a few years ago. Yeah. Guardian journalist Keith Stewart wrote in his review, most admirers of the game that shall not be named will readily agree on the game's most glaring fault, the inconsistent voice acting. Some of the acting performances are wooden to the point of somnambulism. Uh-oh. We turned to Steam for player feedback on the game, whose title we're not going to share with you. And Pixel Junkie says, is the horrible voice acting enough for a reason not to buy said game? Ambler writes, the voice acting really kills it. It is intensely unpleasant or laughable with a main character so badly voiced that I kept hoping someone kills him so I never have to hear his monotone drawl again. And Asterdax wrote, I tried really hard to look past it. What's going on in the scene is completely drowned out by the physical response your body has to how cringy the main character is. I tried, but I refunded. So, yes, this is not good. Let's just put it that way.
And really, that's why we're here this evening. Actors in games we don't always have the luxury of a year to prepare for our performance. In fact, we very rarely do, if ever. We don't have weeks of rehearsal and contemplation that the stage actor enjoys, and we don't have the benefit of what might be considered the absolute basics when it comes to developing a good performance. And what are those basics? A script, a set, fellow actors to work with, a costume, and above all, time.
That is not to say that there aren't great performances in games. There are, and BAFTA Games has been celebrating them and recognized them for the past 12 years. Jane is a recipient of Best Performance in Games from 2021. And we want to let you know that it's developers like the people on this call that provide fertile ground for these performances with innovative, wonderful characters and storylines. And we've seen that players, they don't mince words when it comes to voice acting. In today's arena, gamers have come to expect that the same level of excellence in performance is there as it is in gameplay. Now, Sally Beaumont has written, "The awful thing about bad acting is when you do good acting, no one notices." True. Talent is key, and it's sometimes not often rewarded.
Well, yes. And I do think, Sally, that's changing a little bit. I think that there is this real appreciation for good acting in games, and we do see that a lot now. We see a sort of expectation for it too, because I think it's what the player is sort of coming to expect, also based on us being audience members and, for film and TV and that sort of thing. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. And circling back to actors in games, our voices in games are really there to tell the developer's story. We're there to deliver the text and the plot points and the richness of story that game developers have spent months and, well, most likely years working on. And so when your voice actors come in at the 11th hour to breathe life into that text, and we're really talking about actors in the voice booth as opposed to motion capture, performance capture here, because this is a slightly different, not slightly, it's quite a different thing. But when you bring those voice actors into the booth at the 11th hour, you want to set them up in the best possible way so that they can deliver the best possible performance that you and the actors will be proud of. So tonight, we want to offer a few ideas as to how we can do exactly that. So we're going to spend our time considering how we can condense that actor's process that we were talking about earlier into a time frame that works for the way a performance in games is currently recorded. When actors get the script the day before their recording session, time is a luxury we simply don't have. So actors in games and the directors and developers who work with them need to come up with some hacks that will help mitigate some of these challenges.
And we're going to cover how you might structure, shape, and prepare your dialogue for best performance, covering best practice in voice direction and session management. And at the end of this evening, you'll hopefully have a better sense of how to take care of the actors that you're recording with and how to work with them to build a naturalistic performance throughout the process. Now, we can consider some of these things that might derail an actor, including difficult material, unhelpful direction, a working environment that might feel stressful and unsafe. And please feel free to come with questions, comments, and challenges. So let's get to it.
So yes, we start with casting. Do you want to go into this, David?
Sure. Now, when you all have your own workflows and processes for finding actors, and we're not going to mess with those, but if possible, you want to give your casting directors, agents, and actors the ability to know as much about the character as possible. So pictures and artwork, age, physical attributes, accent, personality, vocal quality. Also, are we rooted in realism, or do you want something fantastical, something melodramatic? If a character's artwork gives an impression of a certain race or gender, but you're open to others, well, please make that clear. For the edition itself, for the script, make sure that we know what kind of situations we're in for each line. Are we on the attack? Are we defeated? Are we gloating? To make the most of this, it's super basic stuff, but I promise that someone in the room or on this call will need to hear this. So here's a great trick. a lot of times the biography in the audition script is actually lengthier than the script that an actor is sent. So in those kinds of cases, I like to turn the biography into a script. So we take the key action and the emotive words and we shape them into a monologue. So here's an example from Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and I played a character called Malos in that. So you see the age, about 30, gender male, physically athletic, burly even. Now, burly will help me, especially as an actor, an American accent, and then the keywords: violent, raging, and determined. And he is, so I can read you the biog. One of the game's main antagonists. He's got quite an explosive temper, and he's hell-bent on destroying the world, having come to believe that it and its inhabitants have no worth. Holds everyone in contempt, has a very bleak, nihilistic worldview, and takes steps to destroy everything with grim determination. Believes this to be his fate, his ultimate purpose for existing. The reason for this is that he was corrupted. So let's find those keywords and let's create a moment. Okay. So this is, unfortunately, it's cut off a little bit of it, but I'll try to guess what I wrote. So I took all of this and turned it into a monologue for myself. There we go. And I'll read it to you. I guess you could say I'm one of life's bad guys. This world and the people on it have no worth, and it's time to burn everything to the ground. This is my fate, my ultimate purpose for existing. People insist it's because of my programming, that I'm corrupted in some ways, but I don't care. In fact, I don't give a damn about anyone. And if you piss me off, I will destroy you. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, as a suggestion, you can do this too. Voice actors. Oh, thank you, Aiden, for that. So actors, you can do this, especially if your characters don't have a lot of lines in your auditions. Writers, when you are actually writing the biography for these people, you can actually write it in the first person, and it actually will help.
And it's interesting too, I think, David, in terms of creating these biographies, what the reason why we do that is because we immediately start to get information from the bio that informs who the character is and how they are in the world. So it could be an interesting exercise when these bios are written to then actually read them in the first person and see what kind of information you as a writer get from it. And there might be a way in doing so of kind of cutting out the fat, as it were, or just making the bio succinct so that it's full of information that's really useful for the actor. And that can be quite a helpful thing to do.
It also helped me. It helped me because I was able to figure out that someone who is like this, in order to be understood and to not be raging all the time and be screaming, well, what you can do is you can hit all the consonants that are there, and that helped me actually create the character when I got to it. So sorry about that little side note.
No, it's such a useful tool, absolutely. So we talked about that approach of the character of the bio. So let's talk about the actual session itself. So there is a phrase that I'm sure many of you are familiar with when it comes to performance and acting, which is acting is reacting. Now, Stanislavski suggests that acting should never be forced. Instead, all actions should arise from some impetus or stimuli. In other words, acting is simply reacting to something that's happening to you or around you or within you. And reacting is like stepping into the unknown. We don't plan our reactions, we just react. It comes from the moment. And it's surprising and interesting how things can rise to the surface if we don't plan how we're going to deliver a line, but instead just let it come. So let's consider how this actual process aspect of acting might play out in a recording studio. In reality, in the studio, there's precious little for the actor to react to. And as mentioned, before, there's no set, there's no costume, there's no other actors. Although increasingly we are starting to see ensemble recording sessions, and this is great. So whenever you can manage to get a group of actors into a room, I know it's a scheduling nightmare and difficult for many other reasons, but it is really something that we're very used to working with, and it can generate some really good work. Yes, right. Oh yeah, just to continue on it. So the reason why is, if somebody, for example, if David gives me a line, then I can react to that and make that line inform how I say my line, and back and forth and back and forth, and then suddenly interesting and magical things can happen. So when the actors solo in the studio, you don't really have anything to react to. The actor in the studio might be lucky if the other actors have recorded their lines in a prior session. Otherwise, it's the performance director who will have to read those lines, and they may read them in well, or they may not. And we have to work off whatever is given to us.
So some things to think about. What is our environment? Are we inside? Are we outside? Are we on a mountain? Are we in a hospital with metal tables and chairs? What's our proximity to the camera? Or as in, where are they seeing us from? What's our proximity to other actors? Are we being secretive, or can we talk openly? How is the character affected by the elements? How do we relate to the people that we're talking to or about? Make sure that the levels are the same for different actors in different sessions who are playing the same scene. So, how do we deal with this? Context. Providing context that foregrounds the given circumstances of that scene that are actionable and is directly related to their journey as a character in that moment. This is key. So in doing so, you're packing the actor's imagination with stimuli. And this stimuli is the source material that takes the place of the other actors, the set, and all the other stuff that we are normally accustomed to reacting to. So make sure that the context that you provide is specific, concise, and economical. Too much info can be overwhelming, and it can knock your actor out of the zone. So, like, for example, if you spend too much time explaining and explaining and explaining, then suddenly we've forgotten where we've come from. So it's a good idea to be as economical with your information as possible. Now, what makes good context? All right. What's just happened? What's going on in the environment? What does the character want? And why does that matter? So we'll play around with this later, but to give you an idea, direction is useful for an actor that might look something like this.
So, David, you have just slain that
Yes.
creature. You
Yes.
weren't expecting this, and it was a really tough fight, and now you're exhausted. The captain assured you that this was a safe mission. You now know he's undermined you. This environment is increasingly hostile. Night is ascending. It's difficult terrain, and the little light that is left, you can see that there's half rotting corpses everywhere. You need to get back to one of the team so that they know that the captain has turned. So this sort of detail is going to generate a better performance than the example I gave earlier of just make her angrier or make her go faster or whatever. And it's far better for us to understand why a character is angry or frustrated or sad. And then you can dial up or down how angry you want them to be if you really understand the context in which they're operating.
Now, I have a question for the call. Is anybody here interested in how actors deal with branching? Just give me a hands up or whatever if there's anyone that would like me to go into it. Okay, Sally's interested. Fine. Do the rest of you okay with me? Okay, great. Okay, we've got at least two people. I'm gonna jump into it. So branches are increasingly becoming the norm. And the easiest way for the actor to record branches is by starting with the most neutral ones first, and then going further and further into the extreme. So if possible, set your first section of dialogue and then drop the actor in for the branches. What I mean by that is when you are writing branches, for example, sometimes you will have to, for the sake of your developers or something like that, you only put the 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 line before the branch once, and then you bring us into, and then you've got the all the other branching lines. So, for example, if you don't have a director who's working with us, then they might not be very good at bringing us back to the first part of the branch again. So, an idea is to actually have a performance script where you take us into the branch each time and you show us the branches. And if you start with the most neutral and you go into the more extreme, you can, for example, number it so that we understand that 1 is neutral, 5 is extreme. And then you can actually help tell us what you need from us. So you can do, let's say, branch. So establishing branch to a 2, then establishing branch to a 4, and then a 5. And it will help both you and us make sure that we are making these branches fit with each other. Now, the big studios will make sure that you are replayed the line of that goes into the branch again and again. That is very, very helpful. And sometimes I think that if you're working with someone and you're not able to do that, then perhaps get them to just record that bit themselves so that they can bring themselves back to that first point of branching. Have I confused the hell out of anyone before we continue?
Branches are confusing.
They are to everybody.
I'm going to
All
take
right.
a quick moment and look at the chat here, just in case there's anything we want to.
Yes. Okay. Well, Rebecca's happy, so screw the rest of you. Okay.
Sally says that I've been asked to do them sequentially without the feed line, and it's tough not to let them bleed into each other. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why, that context is so important, and continuity as well. It's hard to hold a lot in your mind too, I think, when you're performing, because especially in games, because there is a lot to think about, and we don't, always have that script in hand, and so we do need, I think, help for this sort of thing, branches in particular, because they can be quite complex.
And they're becoming the norm,
Yeah.
because these games are getting bigger and bigger. But anyway, let's take a quick moment to talk about your point of contact. So by that I mean the person who's going to talk things through with the actor during the session. So they are performance directors or perhaps your narrative lead. Now, too many cooks spoil the broth. Everyone has a different way of saying things, but if one person can take everyone's ideas and distill them into a clear thought or an action, then the actor can run with it. And being able to communicate a clear vision is key. So, with that, something that I highly recommend is the performance director. Why do we rave about them? Because they are the umbilical between you and the actor. They're the link between the business of what you're trying to make happen and the work being done by the actor. And they know how to talk to us. They know how vulnerable we are at the moment. They also are able to step back and listen and look at the different performances, so there's variation in people's energies. So, for example, if you are someone who is creating the game and you want to direct somebody, well, the thing is, you're hearing everything in your own voice. And sometimes having a performance director on who's able to create light and dark and different types of energy and the way things are approached or how the lines are attacked, it will help you. So if you can afford it, please hire a performance director. They're also not your company and they're not the actor, so they're neutral and they'll be able to feed back to either party if something is going wrong.
And speaking of directors, I know of a few whose essential approach to working with actors is treat 'em mean to keep 'em keen. And I can honestly say that my worst performances have come from my collaboration with these sorts of directors who are not very generous. I think most people who've worked with bullies or folks who are not that nice will feel the same. And it seems like common sense, but still, people are out there and they're crap and they're doing alive and well, and we just don't want that. So, what if it is you who is being treated like crap by the actor? Circling back to a director who's not very nice, if you do see that happening in your recording booth or in your studio, just see if you can deal with it, because it's not great behavior. But um, sometimes this will come at you from the actor. And as games become recognized for the amazing art form that they are, they will attract some pretty big talent. They already have. And you might find yourself in a recording session with a great big massive star who has this big reputation to maintain and a lot of attitude to go with it. Now, generally speaking, most stars that I think both David and I have met have been absolutely lovely, but there are exceptions to that rule. So consider that this star, who's maybe from film and TV, etc., they might not be accustomed to the demands of the voice booth for all of the things that I just mentioned. They've got this process that's really seated in having a lot of time and contemplation and collaboration with others. So suddenly, if they're thrust into this highly unusual environment for actors, it might make them feel destabilized and frustrated and insecure. So how can we deal with these sorts of moments? Even if it isn't a big star, you might end up with actors who are kind of like, I'm not very happy here, not feeling too good, and they might get a little prickly. So one of the things that I have always found that is really helpful for me as a performer is when the developer recruits me into your vision for the game. And you can be really confident with this. You'll be so articulate about your game because you really know it inside and out. Use a vocabulary that will be familiar to them, which is based on some of the things we already covered, like your objective in the scene is, your goal is this, a tactic might be this, these are the obstacles, and just be really clear and concise with your direction. And then there's always, you can always praise them and tell them, gosh, you're doing so great, wow, wonderful, and that will make them feel better.
I especially like that.
Yeah, me too. I know it's a little pat on the head. But yeah, because once again, if you get this kind of sense of insecurity or frustration, it really usually is because the actor is, if they're not experienced in games, they're finding themselves in a highly unusual environment. And so perhaps it's just a question of recognizing that and then finding ways to bridge that gap and make them feel safe with this language that they will be familiar with.
Now, if your writing room and your dev team don't know anything about the lived life and experience of the characters that they're creating, make sure to find ways to solve that. So if you're writing a gay or trans character, for example, make sure to make them fully rounded and use the actor. If you give us permission, we will give you feedback and help you create a fuller, richer character. And there's usually a reason why we've been hired. So, so if our lived experience can inform that character, all the better. Also, can we talk about line reads? Now, do you guys understand what I mean by line read? I hope you do.
I can give you an example.
Yes, please.
Okay. So I need a bit of text, I suppose. So David, can you say the line, let's see here. I want you to say it. I was so seriously preposterous in those days. That's how I want you to deliver the line.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Was that a line read?
That was line reading. I was so seriously preposterous in those days. Okay, can you do it like that, please? And actually, maybe what the right thing to do is to suggest to David, look, I want you to connect a little bit more to the idea of how ridiculous you used to be. So if you can find a way to connect to that idea more. So what we're doing, instead of just giving how we hear the line in our head, we ask the actor to explore it a little bit more so they can find it themselves, because when they find it themselves, it's more authentic. And sometimes people who give line readings are not actors, and the way they hear it in their head, it might not come out of their mouth the way they hear it in their head, and it can be a bit it can waste time, and it can be a bit
Yes.
frustrating for the actor.
So I think what we're saying is that please give the actor 1 or 2 chances to find the performance themselves. And if you've given them all the clues in the world, by the 3rd take, you can start to lead them towards a line read. But if you give me constant line reads, within half an hour, I'm going to give you warnings, and I will start very, very politely, and I'll get less polite as we go along. But within half an hour, I will give up, and then I'll let you give me line reads for each line. And this means that the energy and the delivery of each line belongs to the person directing me, and that could potentially end up with every character sounding the same. And this happens all the time, especially when you bring celebrities in, because most of the time, let's say they are, a wrestler. Well, they're not used to being in the microphone on the booth, and sometimes they need to be led to water. But hopefully, your actors shouldn't be. And some wrestlers, like The Rock, are amazing. But
Let's
some
not be
other, yeah.
anti-wrestler here. I really urge us not to judge wrestlers on tonight.
Absolutely, I apologize profusely. Um, um, if you are in the line of sight of the actor, please settle for the takes. We've already talked about this, and we understand that there's a lot going on. But if you've given a direction and you start talking or working on other stuff while the actor is working, it's actually quite disconcerting. And we laugh at the Christian Bale outburst, but why did that happen? Were his lines changed last minute? Uh, had he or the director asked for quiet so he could focus on the moment? Was it a difficult scene emotionally? Did he have to put himself in that place? Now, you had a similar thing happen to you, right, Jane?
I did, yeah. So for those, I'm sure everybody's familiar with the Christian Bale outburst, but for those of you who are not, he had this most fantastical outburst on set where I think somebody was walking across the set as he was in the middle of a scene, not across the set, but in his line of vision. And he was just like, fuck it, excuse my language, but and he just blew. It's a kind of infamous moment. And I just thought it was so interesting when we hear about actors blowing their lid, because I think our first impulse is to go, oh God, like, who does he think he is? But actually, if it's a really difficult scene and that actor has really invested a lot of themselves in the scene, that can be extremely jarring. And so I didn't have a massive outburst, not like Christian Bale, but I did have a moment where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm working so hard in this scene. I've been, the direction that I was given was, your son has just been shot. And we just want to see that moment of realization that he's dead, and he died a violent death. Okay, my son has just been shot. I have to go to that place. I'm going to experience that feeling. And what does that mean for me? Oh my God, my child has just died. Okay, got it. Action, here I go. And then somebody in the background started speaking and rifling through their text, and they had a little laugh about something. And I said, I'm sorry, I have to stop here. I can't go through this moment if there's so much distraction on set. And if you really want the truth of this moment, then you need to give me the space and the time to find it for you. And it's too hard for me to get there if there's all this peripheral stuff going on around me. So, and this is one of those moments, where, and I think when I said that, people were like, oh, okay, what's wrong with her? Or maybe they didn't. Some probably thought that, and others probably thought, oh dear, what have I done? But it's one of those moments where I was probably a bit prickly, but it was because I wasn't getting what I needed to create the moment that the developer needed in their game. And so it was just one of those moments that perhaps highlights how an actor's working, and there's something in the environment that is not actually allowing them to do their best work. And again, I keep circling it back to the environments that we're trained for and that we are mostly familiar with, which would be, when the director yells action on set, everybody settles and everybody's focused on what's going on in that moment. Or certainly when we're in rehearsal and we're working on a scene, it's the same thing, and also on stage too. So this is an important thing to keep in mind. And again, it feels like it's kind of common sense if somebody's working just to give them focus. But the fact that it does happen made me think, okay, it's not that it's not common sense, but it's a lack of familiarity, perhaps. Oh, is somebody asking a question? I can hear voices in the background. So if you were, just put your hand up, but otherwise. Yeah, so that was my little experience with that. So let's move on to other little interesting things that I think are going to be really familiar with a lot of people in any working environment right now. But this is challenging content, and it's a kind of an interesting and good thing to talk about, because we want to consider how other things might derail a performer. And we've learned so much about this in recent times, but it's always good to check in with our unconscious biases and see what we can discover there. For example, the things that dear David just expressed about wrestlers. We have to consider that, David. Anyway, we'll talk about that after. So we need to discover what's there so that we can provide a working environment that feels safe for everybody. And someone in the room with protected characteristics, which are defined by the Equalities Act that you might be familiar with, might not feel as comfortable in the room as you do or as others do. And by protected characteristics, we mean age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnership, pregnancy and maternity, race, religion or beliefs, sex, and sexual orientation. So how does all of that connect to the process of acting? Apart from it just being good practice, you ideally want the actor you're working with to bring themselves to the work. However, it's so hard to bring yourself to your work when you're feeling stressed because you're feeling othered. And for example, I've seen this in the booth. I've felt this in the booth when it's suddenly announced that I have to do a sex scene. And there's been no warning. And all I can see behind the glass of the control room are a group of men. And all I can hear coming in via my headphones from maybe the game developer in another country is a male voice. And this is so uncomfortable. And suddenly, instead of putting all my energy into my acting, which is the job I've been hired to do, a really good portion of my focus has gone towards managing and mitigating how uncomfortable I feel. So suddenly I don't feel so open and willing to jump into the scene because I feel vulnerable. And when we feel vulnerable, it's just a natural human thing. The walls start to come up and we can go into self-protection mode. And as an actor, that is such a shame because we're then at a distance from our own creativity. And what hangs in the balance is that naturalistic, believable performance that we're striving for. And Stanislavski articulated a truth that I think resonates for all of us, which is tension kills creativity. So have a think about warning your actors in advance of challenging content. Give some thought into how an actor might end up feeling othered or compromised by your working environment and or the content of your scripts, and see what you can do in advance to mitigate this. Make sure that your communication is used to bring the actor closer to the creative vision of your game with a language that they understand and a vocabulary that will be recognized as being in tune with their process, their culture, and who they are. And this is such a challenging thing in the era of NDAs where we don't have the opportunity to go through the script and see, oh, I've got a sex scene. Oh, I have to deliver racist content. Okay, how am I gonna deal with that? Or maybe I can have a conversation with somebody about that in advance. We don't have the luxury of that. So the responsibility for that really falls on the developer to anticipate that. Over to you, David.
Well, let's talk about session management. So how are you scheduling your days? Are you bringing one actor in every day for a week? Well, what if lines need to be changed? Do you have time to make those changes overnight? Does your actor have the stamina to bring what you need consistently over a long period of time? Now, it may seem better to you and your finance team to schedule people in long blocks, but this might end up biting you in the ass later on. Breaks are important for you and your actor, so let them take that break. If they step away into the canteen or green room, it might mean that they're vocally tired and need to take 5 to 15 minutes of silence to hydrate and reset. Vocal health is also super important. So, will the actor sound different after 5 days of high intensity work? Most likely. Maybe you need to take a day or two between the hard work.
Um,
Yeah. Are you
and
guys happy to continue? Or, sorry, I interrupted you, Jane.
no, not at all. Not at all. I think what we'd like to do, we can talk a little bit about vocalization, I suppose. Sorry, localization. Um, and then I think what might be kind of nice is to take a short break if you like, and then we can just go into a Q&A and answer your questions and have a conversation around this. We've given you an awful lot of information here. And if you need clarity with some of these things, then let's have a wee chat about that. And it'd also be really good to hear your experiences too. I know, as I said earlier, there's some, there are some actors on this call and lots of people, working on the creative side of game development. So it'd be wonderful to hear your thoughts as well. So would you all like a break? Should we take a 5 minute, or do you just want to keep going? We've got uh, just over an hour left. Let me just have a look at the chat here and see what the feedback is about that. Cool. Let the session managers. Okay. Is that, Dom, did you say live the session management ourselves by having a break? No, did you mean have a break now? I'm confused.
How about we hit localization, and then we keep the Zoom call open, but we step away for 5 minutes and rehydrate and go for a wee, and then we can do a Q&A. How about
Nice
that?
one. I like that, David. Yep. I like that. Okay. Do you want to have a chat about localization?
Yes, let's do. Okay. So since games are now a global industry, are you localizing your work? Was your English work funny? Were there memes? Were there puns? So I've spoken to a few developers who have had to do this, and what they like to do is explain the joke in the Excel spreadsheet. Get the translator to back translate the joke, and then get the localizing actor to look it over. I actually spoke to the head writer of Borderlands about this, and they have a great team of translators working with them, but the head writer puts their email address in the work order, so people can ask questions and make sure they find the right local joke or meme. And it's worked out really, really well for them, and it's something to be said, because we are, for some reason, we do not like access in the games world. But if someone is taking your work and localizing it to another language, give them your email address, let them check in, because you don't want to get spanked by the Spanish translation or the German translation later on. What do they need to know about your game in order to create an effective performance? Once again, as Jane put it so beautifully earlier, who, what, where, when, and why. Because it works, and it doesn't get you bogged down in the amazing tech that will blow the player away, of course. And we don't need to know about that right now.
I was just going to answer some of the questions that came up in the chat or comments. And yeah, we were talking, Sally and Key were talking about that sense of play and engagement, when it comes to directing actors. And I think that's so important. I think there's a lot of magical, wonderful stuff that come out of engendering that sort of environment in the voice booth. Because play is, puts us into an immediate state of relaxation, which then, of course, is leads us into a direct course towards our own creativity. And we talk a lot about connecting. Two actors like to connect to other actors, but we also connect an awful lot to our directors or to the people, or writers, or people who are giving us information. And I think whatever we can do to engender that kind of connection is really useful for all of us, whether we're actors or writers or directors or animators or whatever. And a lot of the sense of playfulness and experimentation can really be the fuel for that connection, that creative connection. So thank you, Key and Sally, for pointing that out. We were also talking about branching in spreadsheets. And I think, Sally, you had also mentioned that it saves money and it's useful. Maybe, Dom, you mentioned that too. It's useful to put all that stuff on a spreadsheet. Absolutely, because it allows us to sort of chart back to the beginning, to that line that instigates the various different branches. But spreadsheets are also really interesting to work with as an actor, because there's never been a film script or a theater script or a TV script that has been printed out on a spreadsheet for an actor. Never, ever, ever, in my knowledge. And yet it is par for the course in games. So it is yet another thing that an actor who's maybe not very experienced in games might have a look at that spreadsheet on a monitor with no opportunity to sort of take a pen out and make little notes and all this sort of stuff. They might look at that and go, oh my God, I don't even know what I'm looking at here. So, I have a sort of love-hate relationship with spreadsheets for that reason. I think right now, because I've done so many games, I'm quite accustomed to it. It's actually no big deal. But the first time you look at a spreadsheet, there's an awful lot of information there. And you can feel a little bit like a deer in the headlights going, what am I don't even know what I'm reading here. So that's a little something to keep in mind too. If you start to think, oh, this actor's not very fluent with this work, it could be that they're just adjusting to, oh, thanks, David, just adjusting to, how the lines are actually delivered for us to deliver, if that makes sense. And Alex asked such a great question. Are there any situations where an actor might ask for a line reading or would really benefit from one? And yes, absolutely. I think, sometimes a director will say, okay, Jane, I need higher stakes in that line. Just make it more intense. And if they keep having to ask me again and again, then clearly I've gotten stuck. Maybe I'm tired, or I have inadvertently married myself to a line delivery and I just can't divorce myself from it. So sometimes a line read as a last resort is actually great information. And I can hear, oh, I see, they want the higher stakes, and what they're doing to create that is they're stressing this word. Okay, fine, I can stress that word and I can go with that, and I can make it my own because I've only heard that line reading once coming from them. I can take the information, the directive that is inherent in that line reading, and make it my own performance. So definitely there's moments when we can use that as a tool. It just can't be the first tool that we default to, and it certainly can't be the only tool that we use. It's much better for an actor to have context, and to really understand why it is they're doing whatever it is that they're doing. Sally, you said that's an accessibility issue too. So Tim says, I worked with an actor who struggled to read the small font on a spreadsheet. So I made a point of making it large font for this actor. Absolutely, that is important, and that is an accessibility thing. And as some of you know, I have ADHD, and as the actor with ADHD, if there's too much going on, oh my God, a lot of my energy is just like, and all I want to do is put my energy on my performance, and that's it. So if I'm spending a lot of time sorting out all the peripheral stuff, and that includes spreadsheets and not being able to read it properly or whatever, then that will make me very tired during the course of a session. David,
Aiden asked a good question. How much do you find the physical studio environment itself affects your performance? And yes, you've worked in a lot of windowless, hot, non-air conditioned studios, and yes, that is very much the truth. For example, during lockdown, um, I recorded an entire game under a blanket, and I had to make it work for me. I had to ask for more breaks. Um, I had to warn my neighbors that I wasn't being killed or that I wasn't attacking anyone. Um, uh, and had to ask the lovely daughter next door not to play the violin, even though that it did affect my performances at times. But what I can say is that yes, if you have an opportunity when you're looking at um, your finances, that you can actually use a studio, what will help, of course, is the fact that it's the same microphone in the same room that you're using with everybody. So therefore, you will have fewer chances of it sounding like people are in different places, even though they're in the same room or in the same space in the game. Also, when uh, it it just means that you have a space to work. I have an amazing home studio, but it is 1.2 meters by 1.2 meters, and then there's foam and there's all kinds of stuff in the way. So what happens is that if I'm playing a very energetic character, I can't use my upper body as much as I usually do. So I have to bring it in. And yes, that will affect the way I work. So if you have a chance to bring people into a studio that has a lovely airy room with air conditioning that won't affect the recording, you might actually save yourself some time.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Um, let's see here. Sally has made us. You can also talk.
Yeah,
Yeah, feel free instead of putting it in the chat to just pipe up and ask your question, because I would hate at this stage of the game to miss out on a question that's been put in the chat. Oh yes,
Alejandro's
Yeah.
unmuted.
Yeah.
you go
Sorry, I
for
didn't want to
it.
interrupt. Sorry. I'm going to be a tiny bit cheeky because I'm going to ask 3 questions.
Oh,
Very
good.
sorry. So one is about the kind of the casting. So for example, when I do give the brief and try to do castings, I usually try to get like 3 pieces of script from different moments in the game. Like one maybe a bit more sad, normal, more energetic, to see the range of the character and the actor. Is that asking too much or not too much? Or because I know that sometimes kind of you, as far as I know, you guys don't get paid for casting, so it is time that you're taking out all your. I don't know that I might be saying something really critical. So that's one. The other one is sessions and organizing the sessions. So if time allowed, would you recommend to space intense sessions where there's something really, you have a session where there's maybe in the morning where you have very a lot of drama, very intense moments, and then maybe the afternoon doing a bit more lighter, or vice versa, or next day do something not that intense. So I know that some of the scenes could be emotionally draining. So how would you suggest to do that? And the other one is, would you, if possible, would you like to meet the director or the art or the writer before the session starts? Because sometimes I've been in sessions where I got to meet the actor or actress on the session, not previous talk or anything, and they start going, and it's a bit kind of strange, at least for me.
It's strange for you to meet the act. Do you say that bit again, Alejandro? It's strange to meet the actor before.
To meet the actor just before the session,
Just
the same day of the session, if possible, to meet them before, talk
yeah,
about the game, about the characters, if of course, if possible.
absolutely. So, I well, let's start with your first question. You're asking about. I love the fact that you're being considerate and conscious of acting actors to do a lot of work for an audition. You're right, we don't get paid for those. And this is an interesting dilemma. I think there's a balance that needs to be struck there. And I'm interested to hear what the other actors think about this. But actors, we do want to show our range. It's wonderful to give us material whereby which we can really express kind of all the different colors of the character that you're sharing with us. And also we're accustomed, to, banging out auditions that can be really big and extensive, and you just do it. It takes your whole afternoon to do a self-tape or whatever, and you never, maybe you hear from them or maybe you don't, but that is part of our business, auditioning and spending time in auditioning. So I would say, there are, of course, recent movements whereby actors have asked British Equity, for example, to suggest to casting directors that we don't get huge, massive, like 7-page scenes to memorize for the following day, because that is a lot of work. So we need to have a balance between these things. Give us enough that we can show you that we can do what you need us to do, and then B, for it not to be completely overwhelming. Anybody else want to pitch in about that?
I'll just very quickly. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Kai.
Okay. I've kind of been on both sides of it, at least kind of in the indie scene of casting and being a voice actor in the scene. And one of the key things with auditions for me, it's like when you're looking for jobs on LinkedIn, is the grammar all correct? Is it clear, like the company isn't just putting out a interview for whatever and they don't really care and they're probably doing internal hire anyway? Like if there's clearly that love and that thought and that that consideration that's been put into it, like the fact you said, is it too much if I do too many emotional ranges? Even just by, highlighting that in the casting call, like before, I know I've said there are other scenes I'm open for people to do, but they are slightly more spoilerish or they're slightly more emotionally intense, and having those kinds of, if there's anything we can do to make that job easier because it is unpaid, then we do what we can. But I always think, any time that's kind of on your mind, it usually shows in the part that you're putting out there for people to audition for, and that comes across, and that immediately, at least for me, gets my attention a lot more and makes me put a lot more time and thought into the audition itself as well.
We lost Jane, I think, for a second, but I think she's coming back in. But Sally, you raised your hand.
Yeah, so for me, again, I'm the same. I'm a writer and a voice actor, so I'm playing both sides of this. And I think while it's super, super lovely that you're being so considerate, I think maybe shifting the viewpoint from, oh, I'm asking for this unpaid thing and it's such a bother and I'm so sorry, is to maybe think about it more that we're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing us. And we want to see what this character is, whether we should spend time auditioning for it. Is it juicy? I use the word juicy a lot. It's weird. But just looking at it and going, ooh, what is it about this person that might make me want to audition? What is it that made you want to write it in the first place? That's a key. What are they doing in the game? Why are they in this game? Why are players going to love this character or hate this character? Those are some interesting things to think about. It can be as small as like 3 lines if you're really worried about wasting people's time. I learned a lot from auditioning, so I don't consider it wasted time. But you can sort of think about it as like, what does the character think about themselves? How does the character respond to the main person they talk to? What does it look like when the character is later in the game, when they've experienced a change? If you think about like showing off an opportunity to react, again, that brilliant Uta Hagen quote, that acting is reacting. Give us an opportunity to react, and then you don't need to give us loads and loads of text. You can just give us an opportunity to show what we can do. That's how I approach an audition. From either angle, it's an opportunity to see whether our creativity goes together and we can kind of make the story better together. And I think taking that collaborative approach, actors aren't like bowing and scraping for a desperate, we need this opportunity from you, but it's also, as writers, we're not desperately asking the actors to grace us with their, we're all creatives and we work together and collaborate. And audition is a way of doing that. Also, I'd say that you can keep it short, because if you have any number of auditions, you actually get into a groove really quick, and you're like, oh, I can hear straight away within the first 3 seconds whether they are in the ballpark or not. So you'll start to find you'll get more economical the more castings you do. Yeah.
Yeah, great points both. I would say that the thing, there are certain things that actually sort of ring alarm bells for me when it feels like I am pretty much being asked to perform the entire arc of the character that I'm auditioning for, because then I'll go, well, are you just going to use my performance and put it on? So therefore, what I would say is give snippets, and also, if possible, have us say a little bit. So maybe take some of your script where it's a dialogue and turn it into a bit of a monologue, so that, of course, people who start out as actors in games, they think that they have to then play the other characters as well, and it just becomes a mess. And what we're doing is we're just giving you our performance. So and we have to then imagine your performance. We don't have anybody to read with us for the initial audition. We might for the recall or for the callback. But so what I would say is actually give us stuff that is juicy. Absolutely. I love it. I love it. But don't make me think that I'm doing doing the actual job. I'm there to audition for you, to give you an idea of what I can do. And then it was, your final question was, oh yeah, no, you had the question about high intensity sessions and how to schedule them. Well, what I can say to you is something that we're working on, actually, is to put high sort of barks and screams and stuff like that at the end of the week, end of the day. And we ask that the industry does that, because then it gives us a few days to recover. I still find myself in situations where I will go in and there won't be a performance director, and then I'll be working with the development team, and they will push me towards a place where I do damage to my voice. And I am in a situation now where I can stand up for myself. But I know that there are people starting out who won't. So it is up to you to actually maybe take some time and make sure that you are helping them save their voice to be able to come back tomorrow. I think that's the main thing. Jane was booted off due to her Wi-Fi. She's coming back somehow. And then, yes, go ahead.
Regarding this, would that apply as well for like very sad or very emotional intense scenes as well?
I'd say no to that, actually. I don't think it, because a good actor will not necessarily take the emotions with them beyond the job. So if there are certain rules that we as actors have. So for example, if something traumatic has happened to you, you should really wait 7 years to play a role of a character that actually goes through that trauma, because even though you may feel that you've worked through it, maybe you've talked to a therapist and so on like that, your body has a memory. And if you put yourself in the situation where you go through that trauma again and again and again, and you reset and you go through it again, and then you reset and go through it again, your body will catch up and think that and then it will push you back into that moment. And it does happen to actors, but for the most part, we are there to act and we are there to be in the moment. And also, for high intensity emotional scenes, we have to do them again and again. So I can't let myself go so far that I'm not able to pick myself up, reset, go back to zero, and do the scene again with your notes. I also need to be able to step away, keep a part of my brain able to take your notes on board and follow them. So therefore, yeah, I might be in the depths of despair, but you wanted that word to be highlighted, because that's coming back in 3 scenes time when you're letting us know who the villain is. So I hope that makes sense. Anybody else have any input from your experiences before I move to the next bit, which was, Alejandro, can you just remind me, because I just got
Meeting the directors or
yes, okay. So I am a huge proponent for meeting the creative team beforehand, either by Zoom, having dinner, having lunch, and so on like that. My agent doesn't feel the same way about that. So so my agent might say to me, hey, they've asked you to go to lunch with them. Would you like to charge them for it? Are you happy with them just buying you lunch or buying you coffee or whatever? And every time I'm like, yeah, absolutely, because I want to know as much as possible, because everything is so fucking secret in this industry. Excuse my French. But there are certain actors also who are maybe feel a little bit vulnerable, and therefore they don't want to meet you until they are in the official setting, being your recording session. Well, then if that's the case, then build in half an hour to an hour to have a chat. But I would say that you're always allowed to ask, but you should be making it very clear that you are more than happy to hear a no. If that's is there any safeguarding that I haven't explained from anyone else? Oh, I see. So Alex is saying, I always thought that we could never cross the boundary between actor and agent, or that they're expect paying. Thank you for suggesting it. Absolutely. What I would say is definitely just suggest, if it's possible, say something along the lines of, we don't have, we can take some time out at the beginning of the session if they'd like, but I'd like to meet them informally over a coffee or over lunch. Dinner turns it into something. Sometimes people go, actually, I don't like you going out to dinner. So maybe lunch or coffee is the way to go with that. Right. Okay, I'm just going to see Dom, meeting the team before and building trust is vital. Hopefully one day we'll have reasonable embargoes more than NDAs. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Talk about the character show. Exactly. Yeah. So I think we're on the same line here. Now there were a few other things. Jane is rebooting. I'm just going to let her know that that it's fine, and that we're keeping ourselves busy. Don't worry, we're keeping busy. Oh, nope. There we go. Busy, but missing you. There we go. So here we go. Stand out positive experiences working, perhaps due to a specific process. So yeah, I would say that one of the best things that I came across personally was me having a problem with how I saw my character being represented. So he was a gay character, and unfortunately I would break my NDA by saying anything else, but I felt that he was being stereotyped. And when we were doing the session, I found out that all the writers on the team were straight. And I thankfully had a chance to speak to the performance director, and she immediately CC'd the director, so me, into the email with the director, and said, David seems to have an issue with this. Could you help put him at ease, or do you think that this is something that we need to take on board? And he did both. He said, this is something that's very important to me. My daughter is LGBTQ, and I kind of wrote the character for her. And sort of that started to make me understand, because there were certain aspects of it that felt a little bit separate from me. But of course, if he'd written it about his daughter, and you look at and you see it from that perspective, things start to make sense. So what I mean by that is that I got information that helped me understand why the character was written in a certain way. And then he also took on board what I'd said and changed the writing of the character, changed the way this guy spoke. And I came back into the next session and was blown away by the fact that me just being brave enough to speak to the performance director and letting them know that I was I felt a little bit disconcerted about the character. That was an amazing experience. And it doesn't really happen because they like to keep us separate from you. Okay. Kai, is it Key or Kai?
Key.
I forget.
It's Key.
It is Key.
You're right.
I
Yeah,
always
thank
get
you.
scared.
It's
Sorry.
all right. Yeah, I've had a similar experience. Representation just in general, it's kind of a more and more spoken about thing in the industry generally, but I think it's also more and more important to make sure it's happening, because it's, you know, historically it's not necessarily a thing. And recently I was hired for a project that didn't have any art, it didn't have any kind of notification of character ethnicity, character race, and it turned out that the character that I was asked to play was a Black woman. And obviously I'm not a Black woman, and I had a chat with the director about it, and unfortunately their point of view was, well, I'm Asian and I don't mind. So and obviously on many levels that was a major red flag, and it was already it was already an unpaid project, so it was already kind of a no-brainer. But even if it was a paid project, it would have been, it was kind of a case of, well, that response is immediately not helpful. It's not productive. There isn't kind of a conversation that can happen from that. And there's any kind of establishment of trust or comfortability working with that director, even remotely, has gone. And even to the point where I said, you know, I'd scope out to see if there are any other actresses that would be willing. But even then it would have been people that I known referring them to this guy who I didn't really want to talk to anymore and didn't seem to want to talk to me about stuff, and was like, no, you're fine, just be a Black woman. And that level of discomfortability, like I didn't send anyone to him because I didn't feel comfortable to. And it just creates such an awkward and discomforting environment. But if there is an issue like that, because I know I've had similar things with casting where I know people have been really willing to represent what they are and their culture, and thankfully the project is flexible enough where we're able to do that. But being able to have those conversations and have them openly, and again, just like acknowledging where things can be done better or why things have been done the way they have, like you said, David, it just having that option of conversation and potentially even changing the way that representation happens, especially where it does affect you. It's everything, you know. It's a lot of what actors do. And you know, like I said in the chat, I've worked as a neurodivergent character, as a neurodivergent person, and that's been a really wonderful experience to be able to personify that and to bring my own kind of experience to that, and to work with people more directly around those things, especially where representation is concerned, even if, you know, it is a completely white cishet male writing room. To have that kind of power and influence and voice, if you will, put aside, is a really powerful thing, and it establishes so much trust between, I think, both creative and actor, and that only brings wonderful things back to the vocal booth when it comes to it, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Everybody, welcome Jane back to the party.
Yay!
Hooray! Jane, we're talking about sort of feedback in from the actor to regarding certain situations, and for example, now Alex has written, how can we best create an environment where actors can give feedback on the session, director, character, etc. And I am reticent to let that happen in the session itself, because actors will want to give as much input as possible, and sometimes we don't have time for that. But if you give an actor a chance, for example, after the first session, just to say, hey, we've had the first day. Are you happy with how everything's going? Is there anything that we can work on? And set up that, have the point of contact, get in touch with them about that kind of stuff, then it's something that is very useful. But if you in the session start asking, hey, are you, is there stuff you're worried about? It becomes more about the actor than the character that they're playing. I'm not saying that you should discount anything about the actor's well-being, but we're there to do a job. And sometimes an actor will start going into their own feelings and how they are, and it's our job to turn up and do the job for you if we are prepared, if we are ready to go. And then what you can do is you can look at an option of perhaps feedback before the next session. If it seems like they're really unhappy, if something's not going right, then and they don't feel comfortable voicing their concerns, then you of course can take be like, hey, can we take a 5-minute break? And the point of contact can take them out and be like, just checking in on you. Are you doing okay? Are you happy? Because sometimes they'll just say, like, my dog is sick or something like that. And then you can then reframe for the session. But most of the time it's just because maybe they're trying to get into character. Sometimes I sort of live in the emotional context of the character when I'm playing an emotional scene. So sometimes I might just be a little bit of a Marty arse during the session itself. Jane, am I taking stuff away from an actor's well-being?
No, I don't think so. I think I guess, and I'm obviously not sure what's been offered and talked about since I was rudely booted up on my bloody internet connection. But I think it's good to be aware of the things that definitely will have an impact on an actor. For example, grunts and barks, and that's more about vocal health and that sort of thing. Have we talked about that at all?
A little bit.
Yeah,
but we can touch on it more if anybody needs. So please say if we'd like to spend more time on it.
Yeah, I thought that was really great, Alejandro. Your question about session management and where do we put these more difficult aspects of the work, and yeah, I think it's reasonable in those moments when we've been screaming our heads off or just enacted a death scene or whatever to say, are you good? Are you all right there? Do you need a glass of water? Do you need a little break? Because that's hard work, and it's probably hard for those of you who have to listen to it as well. you could have a hidden agenda there, which is, oh my God, I need to take a break. I can't bear to listen to another cat being strangled to death or whatever it is, So yeah.
The other thing that came up was speaking, seeing if maybe you want to meet before the session, or if you want to build in maybe an hour or half an hour at the first session. And what I said was that it can be offered, but it shouldn't be expected, because agents will want their clients to be paid, and some people will not feel comfortable meeting outside the environment of the work. So sending an option of saying, we can either meet for coffee, we can meet for lunch, or we can build a half an hour into the first session, and give them the option. Then they'll feel probably better about it. Also, Rebecca, I like what you said. I think it's worth in any session when working with a performer you haven't worked with before, letting them know that they're free to ask questions or say if they feel uncomfortable or are tired. Absolutely. Yes, but just don't give us too much rope, because we will just take it all, and we'll just be like, yeah, man, I've had this like thing in my shoulder. Do you have physio in the budget? And we're just doing voice. Yeah. So
I think that's, this is a really interesting thing that you touched upon there, David and Alejandro, with taking the time to talk to an actor before the recording sessions start. And I do think that if if the budget does allow for that, to make that moment part of the work that we're doing together, then by all means do it, because it can really inform the actor in terms of the bigger picture of the game. It can really draw them into your vision for the game, and it can really ignite a strong sense of ownership in terms of our part that we're playing in the game, not part that we're playing as a character, but our part in the game itself as part of the creative team. It's so lovely to feel like we are a part of a team, as opposed to just being a lone wolf. And frequently I felt like a lone wolf working on a game and really having no idea of the whole concept of the game and all that sort of stuff. So if there can be time set aside where it doesn't feel weird, or then I think that is a great thing to facilitate for your actors. And again, circling back to what we might be accustomed to in film and TV, usually if you're playing a big role in a TV series, there's going to be a moment before it all kicks off where everybody gathers for a table read of the whole script, the whole thing, so we all get to get on the same page, as it were. And that can really make a difference for actors. And I think also when you start to articulate to actors what the game is about, it brings clarity to everybody, yourself included. I know that sometimes when I'm talking about a creative endeavor with the other creatives involved, that's the time when it really starts to click into place for me when I'm expressing that to others. So there's a lot of sort of side benefits to that.
Yeah. There's something's come up from both Anna and from Chloe, and that's character bios and references. So how do we feel about other characters being references for the character? So let's say art style, genre of game. Oh no, sorry. I jumped here. There we go. So personality, voice, or similar. How do you feel about that, Jane? I'll give my quick answer. Sometimes it's very useful, especially for when we're doing localization. Excuse me. So they put the Japanese or Chinese character voicing and letting us know what they sounded like for some lines. That can be very useful. But for the most part, I think it's very dangerous to put the reference for a character, because most of the time, you putting the reference in and then putting next to it, actually, I just want, I want the exuberance of the character. So I really like the exuberance of the character from this. Keep in mind that when it falls through the different casting loops and it gets to the actor, we might just get reference, and then you will get us just giving you a carbon copy of the video that you sent us, or the voice file that you sent us. So be very careful about that. That's my view.
Yeah, I would mirror that. Sometimes I did a casting recently, and there was 3 or 4 references for the character, and I had to confess to you that I just ignored all of them, because I wasn't really clear what I was meant to be getting from those references. And they were all very sort of different actresses with very different voices. And I was like, gosh, I don't know. I'm just going to go back to the script and my character bio, and I'm going to harvest all the information I need to play this character from what's in front of me, as opposed to looking at, these other actresses. Now, if I feel like the information in the bio is a little bit thin on the ground and there's a character reference, then I might lean a little bit more heavily on that, because that's all I've got. But it definitely is not going to be my first port of call. And as I say, I usually just go character reference, yeah, whatever, I'll deal with that later, and then I don't even listen to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Again, sorry, that's results based, right? Make her sound like this. Well, why does she sound like that?
Exactly.
What's going on in her world in the given circumstances that makes her sound that way? So again, that's putting the cart before the horse. Just give us the given circumstances, who, what, when, where, and then the how will sort itself out.
Yes. And on that note, Chloe says, do you find that playing the game or seeing gameplay or seeing game art helps your process? Absolutely. If you can show me a picture of my character, if you can show me a sketch of my character, if you can show me just what you drew on a piece of toilet paper when inspiration hit you, yes. If you can show me the character moving, oh my God. If you can show me them interacting with other characters, so therefore you see what the other characters look like and how this person moves and stuff like that, oh my God. It just gets better and better and better and better. Don't show us the stuff from your first pass where you then fired the actor because and you want our input. Don't let us hear anything anyone else has done. Fine if you want, if the developer or the narrative lead or something like that has done like some scratch stuff, put it down, but instead just subtitle it. Just subtitle it so we see it fitting. So then we get a chance to learn what the speed of delivery is like according to you. There's all this stuff. It's always super, super helpful, but don't necessarily give us stuff that will make us think that we have to deliver it a certain way.
Yeah, for sure.
Go ahead.
We didn't talk too much about, the visual aspect of the bio in our presentation, but as David says, it's a really important detail, because there is the way people stand, their posture, how they carry themselves in the world, the expression on their faces, the clothing that they're wearing, those will all affect our performance and our delivery. And there's so much biographical information about, how a character walks, as David says. And it's super informative. And of course, acting work, and this is an interesting thing to note as well, is voice acting work is incredibly physical. And actors need to, we were talking earlier about voice booths and the ideal scenario for a voice booth and all that sort of stuff. And when David was recording, and I think you referred to it as your orange marshmallow, David, because it was an orange blanket put over a drying rack. One of the things that David had to then in that situation sort of sort out was the fact that he couldn't engage his body physically with what the character was doing. So of course, when I make a gesture, you hear that gesture in my voice. You don't see me doing it, but you will hear it. And so actors need to be free to be informed by the physical aspect of the character, and then to be physical in the performance booth. And this is a skill that we pick up. How can we be physical in a fight scene where it's really active, but not make any, peripheral noise that's going to, end up on the microphone, for example, or feet moving or what have you. So sometimes we have to help actors who are not accustomed to that find their way into being physical, to have that sense of movement, while they're talking, and so we can hear that they're moving at pace without them actually, moving in such a way that the mic will pick it up.
Yeah, we I just did this amazing book, contributed to an amazing book on teaching kids how to give a presentation. And I said, drop your anchor. And that's the thing, that you are rooted to the ground. Your feet are stuck to the ground, but that doesn't mean that your body can't move. You've got your hips, you've got your arms, you've even got your knees really to move around. And I am super, super physical, but I make sure that my hands don't go in front of between my face and the microphone, because it will sound very, very different, as Alex has had to most likely deal with several of my takes when I get slightly too carried away. But yes, there's the laughing emoji immediately. Yep. But it does happen. But what we try to do is teach people to anchor, to stay in one as feet position. So if we were in the room together, I would show you sort of the moves that the I guess stance that I go into, which is slightly, you can see it almost. I'm almost sideways on, so that I can move. I don't move too far back, because then once again I will move away from the microphone. But I will feel like I can just, there's like this whole axis that I can work on hilariously inside my little Zoom camera. But it does work, and my arms are free. I don't feel restricted in any way. And a lot of people go into the voice booth working in games, and they say that they feel restricted. And that's just because they haven't been shown how they can work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And if you're getting a slightly wooden performance from an actor, a great way to shift that is to encourage them to get into their bodies, or say to them, just take a moment, just step away from the mic and just be that character and just like act that out and see what that feels like. And because sometimes what happens is we stop breathing, we know we're not getting it, you can hear that you're frustrated and you're like, oh God, I've got the wrong person here. And there's ways that we can work around that. We can encourage the actor back to what is going to be native to that actor, which is to work from their body and to be physically engaged in their performance. And it's really interesting to me how a lot of performers who are new to voice acting forget to engage with their bodies. And I don't know why that is. I think it's called voice work. So we just use our voices, but of course it's, voices are everything. Our whole bodies, our whole life is wrapped up in our voices. So that's a good little thing to think about if you're feeling a bit unsure about your actor. Alejandro, I wanted to ask you about the thing that you popped in the chat here about your experience working. That's really interesting to me. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's no. Well, I mean, they answer the question. Basically, I gave a bunch of kind of casting sheets with ethnicity, background, and everything. I got this company basically sent me a bunch of people, bunch of talent to cast. I did cast kind of all of them. I started saying, cool, can I know their ethnicity? They were like, oh, it's because of the data protection, we cannot share the ethnicity. I was like, yeah, but it is very important. Can you assure me that they are the right ethnicity? Because it is important. The day before the casting, they changed 3 of the actors out of the blue, which I went like, sure. I mean, the recording is tomorrow, so fine. And then I remember going to the session, and yeah, the ethnicity was not the same. The first person that came in, and I went like, it's not the same. It's like, oh, but they can put an accent. I was like, no.
Wow.
Exactly. Like I went like, no. So what do you want to do? Is like, let's do the session, and if the voice is what I need to, then I'll change the character. But that's a lot of work I need to do on the animations and on the model itself. It's like, and then I kind of push very hard to basically I canceled half of the sessions that they're like, yeah, until you don't give me the ethnicity, I'm not gonna will to continue. And we had to record another 2 sessions more because they would keep refusing to give me the ethnicity of the
Wow.
Yeah, it's the only time that has happened to me, not gonna lie. And I was very mad, not gonna lie, on the session. But I mean, the talent, I know, nothing to blame with the talent. And actually the voice that we got was amazing, and we ended up using it, and I ended up changing everything. So we ended up changing everything. But I was like, it's a waste of time from everyone, and I feel it was very disrespectful, to be honest, to everyone involved. So yeah, I'm not going to work with those again. I can tell you that.
Wow, that's shocking and amazing. That happened, I think.
Yeah. Now, and that's the question. Like, can we? So if we work with a company, like an intermediate company, I'm going to mention some. They're not none of those. Okay, like keywords side that they usually manage people. Can we ask for the profile of the actors once we cast them, because I felt so stupid because I was pushing so hard to get ethnicity. It was quite interesting.
Before I answer, Sho, do you want to give your input?
Oh no, sorry, it was actually going to be for hi there,
Okay.
Alejandro. It was actually going to be for a separate question. It's
Okay, no worries.
It's not attached to this.
Okay, I'll give my answer, and then the issue that I can tell you, Alejandro, and others, is that most likely, if that does happen, and because people are hungry, and maybe it's because it's their first or second or third job, they'll go in and they'll do it, and they don't realize what could potentially happen with social media the way it is today, with the reviews that are so easily accessible on Steam and other places. It is a big issue. We find it even in the AAA games these days, because, for example, there's stuff coming from China and from Japan, and from where the art style means that most of the characters look Asian, and we have to then talk about the fact that, are we thinking of this as an art style, or is this actually influencing the ethnicity of the characters that they're casting? And that is, first of all, up to the production company, the developer, and their publisher, because usually at this point it's a localization rather than an original game, and they have to think about whether they want to put in the casting call, therefore, this is what the character looks like, and this is the ethnicity. So, for example, that's an important thing, I'd say. But it is also up to the actor. So if you give the actor art and you say that, this is a Chinese or Japanese character, then it should really stop people from putting themselves forward. But it really will not happen if for example, there's a lot of casting calls that go out on X or Twitter these days and places like that, and people just don't care until it's too late.
I have to note there, David, I did send the characters, the actors did not see the casting sheet at all, which shocked.
But they did see the lines, though, didn't they, for the casting? So that is on whoever sent that out, and I would say never work with them again. Jane, any input before we ask Sho?
No, I think you got that covered. That's just a really interesting experience to hear from your side of things. Wow, that's a lot. Sho, what would you like to say?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Great session, by the way. This has been really informative. I've really enjoyed everything that's been said today. Yeah, so what I wanted to ask was basically, like, when looking at a character that you're like considering to audition for, what little things do you usually look for in that like character bio that helps you filter like whether the role's going to be like valuable or sort of interesting to you to take on, or like the mirror, like are there any big turnoffs that immediately make you go, maybe I'll pass on playing that particular character?
I think, the things that might make me pass on a character are if I find, like, if she's an overly sexualized woman or something, and I'm not really clear on how that is of service to the story of the game, I might go, yeah, I'm not really that interested in that. That's a personal preference for me. But what will draw me to it is, I think, what's so interesting, I think, to work on as an actor is when you have a role where you can see, we were talking about range earlier, where you can see that you will be able to, as an actor, express your creative range via this character. So that, is there nuance in the character? So, okay, let's say the character is this, really strong female type, but is there a little bit that, allows us to see her vulnerability, or a different side of this strength that she has? And if she is a very sexual character, does she have moments that ground her in something other than that note. So I think that is something that would make me feel, oh yeah, I'd like to play that character. That sounds really interesting, and I would like to spend my time being her. So that's my 2 cents. What do you think, David, or anybody else who's an actor in this space?
Well, I mean, I think a few of you brought up things like, if there's a lot of spelling mistakes and things like that, then it shows that they didn't care about what they put out to you. So will they care about the output for the gamer? There's like little clues that come up places. One thing that I will say is that you will probably not get a character Bible. You will not get lots of artwork. You will not get all these things because they want to keep things secret. They want to keep things close to their chest. So I'd say that just a note about the character, like for example, sometimes you get from the director or from the narrative lead, you'll say, this is a very this is a small character, but who is very important to how the game pivots, for example. And you go, oh, okay, so I'm being asked to read for a small character, but my character will have a huge impact. Well, yeah. Even, it's let's say it's an indie game, it's not very well paid, but it's built with an interesting creative team. They let you know who the creative team are, and then they'll say that, this is an important character, even though their recording time and their screen time will be minimal. So things like that. It is, once again, it's this thing of, I'm not saying that you should be massaging the egos of the people who are auditioning for you, but to let them know that you've thought about what you are sending them so that they can give you the best audition possible. That's very, very important as far as I'm concerned. And if you are really, really interested in finding the right person for this, the live Zoom recall or live in-person recall or callback is so useful because you get to see how they are in a high-pressure environment. You get to see how they are with getting feedback. So the performance director will ask them to reframe their performance no matter what, and just to see how well people take direction and all that kind of stuff. So it is, I would say, just show people that their time is valuable and that you're thinking about it. You're being very, very careful about how you're approaching it.
Cool. Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. Just one little note of what you said there. You mentioned if as part of the bio you saw, it's a small character, but it's important how the game pivots. Does that mean that it's not just the character that's quite interesting to you, but also that character's impact to the game or the project itself, that story that impacts you quite a lot as well? Like, would you jump into a project and do an audition or like want to play a role, even though maybe the character itself wouldn't be super interesting to you, but the actual game and project itself is? Would that pull you in? Yeah, cool. Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Bottom line is it's really fun to work, and sometimes we get to play magnificent characters that are just so amazing and have these huge character arcs and journeys, and other times we don't. But I wouldn't pass up a day to be in the studio, for a short session to play a small character. I actually love working. I wouldn't turn away that opportunity anyway. But if it's if a really interesting game and it's a small role, yeah, absolutely. Why not? For sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that.
Pleasure.
Are we coming to the end of our allotted time? We are. Are there any last questions that you guys have for us? We covered it? Sally.
Hello, I'm going to do more of a comment than a question. I just really want to say thank you for this, because I think sometimes when developers look at actors, it can seem like such an alien thing, but actually what we're all doing when we're working in games is taking a creative thing and creating systems around it. And certainly that's something that I've been learning more as a writer, that I'm being creative and I'm creating systems. And it can be really helpful for developers to have a system for approaching how they put the voices into a game. And what I've really appreciated is that while you're telling us about the craft of acting, which is important to know, the key is that you've said, and then let the actor do that part of their job. That the developer, writer, director role is to create a setting for us to do our work. And that sense, I really appreciated that. I have so many notes. This has really been so useful. I'm so glad that you're doing this for the wider industry. I think this stuff really needs to get normalized out there. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sally. That's really wonderful feedback. And I think, you know, it's the same for us too. I think that we as game actors, we talk a lot about how we want to learn more about what developers do too. You know, it's a two-way street of mutual understanding. So that, because we love games, and we all want the games that we're working on to be the best that they can be. And so I think that is exactly what we're doing here tonight, seeking to understand each other's role in this incredible medium, and so that we can, you know, connect and do better, and yeah, have more fun doing it too.
Totally agree. And we are there for each other. And it's this, a game, I think, is this weird thing of almost going from a very, very creative thought to an Excel spreadsheet and lots of code, to then becoming art again. And let me just say that the data points and all that kind of stuff is actually, there's a lot of art involved there. But the fact that we are working together to create something that then becomes an emotional journey for the people who are playing it is sort of one of the main things why I love working in games, because I get so much feedback from people who have been playing my characters, and I hope that because I've had to work against a lot of restrictions in this industry in order to get to where I am, and therefore what I want to try to do is sort of try to wade through those restrictions and sort of say sometimes those aren't needed, but then there are other ones that are very important, and I hope that that's something that we got through today.
Cool. Sally says you have an audition after this. Oh, that's great. Wonderful.
Excellent.
Excellent. Oh, thank you so much for the lovely comments in the chat, everybody. It's been really wonderful to spend time with you tonight, and really appreciated your questions, and just being here. It's wonderful. Thank you.
We're on X, Twitter, and Instagram if you need us, if you got questions and so on. I'm sorry that I couldn't be part of Limit Break this year because of personal reasons, but I'm hoping to come back stronger next year. So
cool. All right, everybody, have an excellent evening. Thank you again. Bye.
Bye.
Good night. Bye.